नमस्कार। पश्यंती के लेखन सूत्र के इस प्रथम सत्र में मैं अनुकृति उपाध्याय आप सबका स्वागत करती हूँ। इस लेखन सूत्र में हम जुड़ रहे हैं शरण्या मणिवन्नन से। शरण्या अंग्रेजी साहित्य में लेखन के क्षेत्र में एक बहुत जाना माना नाम है। बहुत संवेदनशील और भावप्रवण कविताएं, बेहद खूबसूरत गद्य और उतनी ही सुंदर छाया और चित्रकृतियां बनाती हैं। बहुत सारी बहुरंगी सांस्कृतिक विरासत और बहुमुखी प्रतिभा दोनों की धनी हैं। उनकी कहानियों का एक संग्रह जो कि कुछ वर्ष पहले आया था और जिसका नाम है द हाई प्रीस्टेस नेवर मैरीज, उसको लाडली का साउथ एशियन अवार्ड मिला था। और एक बहुत सुंदर उपन्यास, बहुत कवितामय गद्य है जिसमें बहुत ही सुंदर भाव छवियां हैं, जिसमें उसका शीर्षक है द क्वीन ऑफ जैस्मिन कंट्री, और जो कि आंडाल के जीवन पर आधारित है। वो काफी पुरस्कारों के लिए नामांकित हुआ था। अभी हाल ही में उनकी मत्स्य कन्या द्वय मरमेड ड्यूलॉजी वेस्टलैंड से प्रकाशित हुई है, जिनमें से एक किताब मरमेड्स बाय मूनलाइट बच्चों के लिए और इनकैंटेशंस ओवर वाटर वयस्कों के लिए है। दोनों किताबें बहुत प्यार और परिश्रम से बनाई गई हैं और दोनों में बहुत सारी ऐसी बातें हैं जो कि लीक से हटकर हैं और इसलिए उन दोनों को किसी भी एक श्रेणी में रखना कठिन है। तो शरण्या के साथ हम आज बातचीत करेंगे उनके लेखन की यात्रा पर, उनके कृतित्व पर और उनकी नई किताबों पर। Sharanya, you're very, very welcome in Pashyantee in this Lekhan Sutra. Thank you so much for giving us this time.
Thank you so much for having me here. It really is my pleasure.
So, to begin with, I have personally, I've read obviously The Queen of Jasmine Country, and before that, I had read the stories of High Priestess Never Marries. After that, when I read your latest Incantations over Water, it's a lovely book, by the way, in every possible way. What struck me was how many cultural paradigms, how many cultural heritages you have. You've spanned 3 cultures. You write both from cosmopolitan as well as a mythical perspective. Would you please talk a little bit about your writing journey and how these 3 cultures meet in you and why?
Thank you for those questions. You are right that the different cultures that I've inhabited and which inhabit me have deeply influenced my work, sometimes in obvious ways and sometimes in not at all obvious, almost subterranean ways as well. In terms of my writing journey, I started to write as a child when I was 7 years old. And this is not unusual. Most children have a creative side or an athletic side or some side of their personalities and identities, which parents and sometimes even educators consider as hobbies. And not everyone cultivates those aspects, or in far too many cases, those aspects are really hammered out of a person. And so when I look back, I feel really fortunate to have continued to write and then later on to draw and paint as well. And I started to publish, in the way that many, again, children and young people do, with small magazines, and slowly that became performing spoken word in my teens, and then eventually, that turned into a career in books. At the time of our conversation, my 7th book, Incantations Over Water, has just been published. And the publishing industry in India is going through a major tragedy because Westland Books has suddenly been shut down. Westland is the publisher of Incantations as well as its companion book, Mermaids in the Moonlight. And these books are going to go out of print very, very soon. I will just quickly show you Mermaids in the Moonlight as well. This is what it looks like. And as I said, it's a companion to Incantations. This book is for all ages. Incantations Over Water is for adults, but they share a heart, they share a worldscape, and they really do belong together. And speaking of worldscapes, I am a Sri Lankan Tamil who was mostly raised in Malaysia with Indian citizenship. So each of these aspects has had a significant impact on me personally, sometimes in very traumatizing ways. And I think that trauma has trickled into the work quite profoundly. I'll speak a little about my Sri Lankan Tamil identity. My family and I lived on the island when I was a child, and we left when I was around 5 years old to Malaysia, where I lived for 17 years. That was the longest I've ever lived anywhere. And after that, I moved to India, and I've been in India for the last 14 years. Being Sri Lankan Tamil, however you choose to identify, whichever terms or markers you choose to identify with, you are a part of a traumatized community and a diverse community with differing perspectives as well. And so for me, growing up outside of the island and outside of the locations that my grandparents and my parents longed for, which were also the locations that I longed for, it was not easy. But in adulthood, I realized that all of us who grow up in diasporas, whether they are traumatized diasporas or not, have a very specific understanding of our cultures, which is usually based entirely on what our families choose to share with us. And that was just not enough for me. It didn't fulfill my longing. And to return to the island is a very emotionally risky thing. I know of others who've done it and been disappointed, been devastated, been angry, been bored or upset or unfulfilled in some way. And that also means that you give up the beautiful nostalgia that had colored your growing up when confronted with the complex and sometimes very contradictory reality that you meet. But I needed to do that. And my mermaids were really what allowed me to. After a long gap of over a decade and a half, my family and I went to Sri Lanka in 2012. And after that, I began to go back again more frequently from 2016 onwards. And the mermaids were the reason, because I wanted to know why in 2012 I had seen mermaids on so many public facades of Battle, but there were no stories. And going there, telling myself that I was researching this was far easier on my heart than only having the bare truth, the raw truth of it, which is that I wanted to find out if I could belong in the place that my loved ones and I had lost. And I am so grateful that for me, not just creatively, but personally and spiritually and practically, I did actually forge a beautiful new relationship with the place that is entirely mine, that has nothing to do with my grandparents, that has, that only has to do with me and my experiences and the way I connect um, with people there, with places there, with the place that I had longed for, with that inherited longing. But this, like I said, was something that I was only able to do quite, many, many years after longing. And with Malaysia, for me, the manner in which I left was very traumatic. But even more traumatic by far were some events that happened later. Certain betrayals, certain ways in which I was shown that I was not welcome by communities and people whom I thought I belonged to. That is a trauma that I have not yet been able to confront or explore. But that part of my identity is very much a part of my personal wiring. And when I think of my friction with India, it always triggers my deep, deep missing for Malaysia. And as for my friction with India itself, the High Priestess Never Marries is a great example of what I've done with that friction, because those stories are very, very location-centric. They are mostly set in and around Chennai, and my difficult relationship, love-hate relationship with this place is why I've been able to observe the city and render it in the way that I have. That was a very long answer, and I thank you for your patience.
I can't tell you how moved I am. I literally have tears in my eyes listening to you. It is, and I've got goosebumps. I'm at a complete loss. It is so, this was so heartfelt. And it obviously comes from a deep place, just like your work. No wonder your work stirs feelings that, at least for me, those are not my feelings. I never knew they could be stirred in me. So when I read The Queen of Jasmine Country, that beautiful, sensual, lyrical way that Andal is offering herself. That came as a very liberating book to me. I felt liberated to see a woman who is as much my ancestor as yours, as any other woman's, could be so giving and so uninhibited. So obviously these themes, these stories, mine the very deep feelings you have, which while you were speaking had the power of moving me, and I'm sure everybody else who hears this conversation. And I think traumas do inform or hurts or these places which ache and we can't reach them sufficiently. They do distill into our writing, and maybe that's how we reach them, through our writing, perhaps. I would love to hear how you synthesize pain. Is there a process? Does it flow? Do you relive it when you write, or you're writing something and suddenly it floods back? Does it really act? in a cathartic fashion, writing these stories. I would love to hear what you actually experience as you write things which are yours but also not yours, and things which belong to everybody yet are deeply embedded in you. All these contradictions.
Thank you. I'm really moved. Um, Thank you. Pain and catharsis. I experience a lot of pleasure when I write. A lot of pleasure. And I think that, that tells you that, at least for me, the cathartic aspect is really the more pronounced part of my experience when I write, for the most part, not always. But that deep wellspring of pain, whatever it may come from, because I think the public facts of of one's biography, there's always so much more behind that. The deeper lived experiences beyond a public fact that I can share with you about where I've lived. And I think those sort of very private experiences are what really go into the work. Do I relive the pain? Yes, sometimes, but I'm a person who is much more articulate in my writing than I am when I speak. And I think because of that, there's a lot of clarity and clarifying that happens even for myself. I see things in the writing which I had not necessarily known I was thinking or feeling. I excavate those things from within me. And, overall, I find the creative process extremely liberating. And as I said, oftentimes very, very pleasurable. Publishing, putting work out in the world, that's different. That's a whole other kettle of fish. But when it's just me and the work, that is the most beautiful relationship I have, and have maybe even ever had.
That is so true, and that is so beautifully put. I don't believe you when you say you are not as eloquent when you speak as you are in your writing. You definitely are. I want to read to you read an excerpt from Incantations over Water. I want to read it to you. Look at my brazenness reading your work to you, but I can't not read this out to you. I have marked it.
I would
And the
love to hear
pages.
it in your voice. Can you tell me the page? Perhaps I can hold the page up.
Yes, it's 54, page number 54. It has a beautiful picture of, I'm just going to turn it to
Oh,
the screen so that everybody can see. I'm sorry, there's a glare on the page.
I'll hold it.
Yeah.
And you can read. But first I need to figure out how to show this page properly.
Yeah, maybe just move it a little bit. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. So this is the mermaid speaking. I did not barter my voice because of my heart's or my body's longing. I did not sacrifice it as one does blood. I did not take a vow of silence. Were there years in which I did not sing, or years in which nobody was listening? Even as I read it, I get goosebumps. Please tell me, were there years when you were not singing, or years when nobody heard the song, and now all those songs are obviously pouring out of incantations over water. Was this book in the making for a long time? All those years when you were not singing, or we were not fortunate enough to hear?
I've probably been working toward the Ila duology my whole life in some form, whether I knew it or not. And this is a book about disappearances, erasures, elisions, and it's very fitting in a tragic way that these books are going to disappear because they're going out of print. And I'm still coming to terms with that. The phenomenon of the singing fish in the Khaladi Lagoon. Strangely, during the Civil War years, you couldn't really hear it, but at the same time, it was not a good idea to venture into the lagoon at night, because those were years in which people were disappeared, people were killed. There were so many things that remain unaccounted for. And I wonder whether it was that the lagoon itself and whoever or whatever makes that music stayed silent because of the land, because those who heard the music could not leave a record. I'm aware of all the silence that I cannot speak for, and I do not try to speak for it. Instead, I acknowledge it in my work over and over and over again. Yeah.
That is such a beautiful answer. And I think that is you've expressed the essence, the heart of this book, which is a lyrical, novel, graphic, with art in it, with a canvas so wide, and it has been presented in such a deceptively smaller frame, but the canvas actually is vast and it's tragic. Deals with the history of the beautiful island, of its people, all the myths of mermaids ever heard in this world. All those myths you have.
There are many more. I've certainly not written an encyclopedia. There are so many mermaid stories.
And you've entwined your imagination with those strands of old imagination, which is what myths are. Somebody imagined and we inherited those stories. You've woven those with your own new stories, and the whole political upheaval, the displacement, the fallout of the war, and the tragedies, which actually deserve a far worse name than war that happened at that time. This book speaks about them, and this book also speaks about nature. There's a part where you talk about the tsunami, where the sea draws back and then it comes back to claim the land that it has, that perhaps that has disrespected its power. Were you like anywhere around the place when the tsunami happened? Do you have or friends or family anecdotal references?
I was actually in Chennai when the Indian Ocean tsunami of December 2004 hit. And Chennai was also hit by the tsunami. And I will never forget a few days later going to Marina Beach in order to help. I think it was to to offer money or else to offer food, or I don't remember exactly what I was doing there. I was not alone. But there was a haunted, absolutely haunted aura in the place, and it literally sickened me, and I barely did anything. I have friends who worked in tsunami relief in different places, including in Indonesia, who did far more important and critical work. And the tragedy of that, it has such a lasting impression um, on those who survived it, those who experienced loss, and also I think those who have a sense of attunement to landscape, to geography. I love the sea, I love the ocean, but um, when I've been at the Kaladi beach, or when I've even been at beaches in Tamil Nadu, there's always a moment when, for a second, I imagine it. Yeah, so it was a part of this narrative that I couldn't quite get away from. Like I just kept coming back to it somehow as I was writing. And the human impact is explored, but also eventually, when Ila talks about it at the end, it is about her experience as a marine creature when the Mother Ocean begins to roil. Because human sentience is not the only kind that matters on this planet. And there are so many knowledges, not just knowledges among humankind, indigenous knowledges, for example, which are dismissed. But there are other living sentences and the ways in which they see life and the world, which we can learn from. And that's something which I touch on in the book.
Yes, and the very fact that a mermaid narrates the story, half human, half fish, all myth. The very fact that you've uh, made her the focus of this book, she speaks from her perspective, which is different from the human perspective, and yet it is still a human perspective because half of her is human. So that I found that very interesting for a children's book. Those kind of stories are told, but to take a mermaid and transform her into an adult storyteller, and there are all these themes that you touch upon. The sexual theme, where mermaids are viewed as these witch-like creatures who entrap men. um, the power that they possess over nature, over humans, which intimidates but also attracts. All that can also be spoken about a certain kind of women, women who connect with nature, who are aware of their femininity, but also of their individuality, that they are not just female, they are connected to a whole line of that reaches far back into the prehistoric times. So it also speaks, or at least so it seemed to be, that Eli speaks for them too. Was that something that was consciously in your mind when you were crafting Ila?
The most human thing about Ila is her heart, and she has a profound longing in that very, very human heart of hers. And absolutely, she's very much not only in the lineage that you describe, but she shares that heart with most of my characters across my body of work. The women in The High Priestess Never Marries, Andal, lovelorn, lonely, fiercely independent. Ila is very much the same.
So when you craft your characters, do you focus on these qualities, or these qualities are just inherent in the characters you write? I.e., does what comes first? The themes that you pick to see these women with, or these women, and they come packed with these strong characteristics?
I actually don't have to think about it too much, because I think I write these characters because I know them intimately. I am them and they are me. And so it is very easy for me to access their minds, their motivations. And I love when I learn from them. I love when they surprise me. Sometimes they confuse me, but then I learn something from that. So I would actually say that it's not so much me doing the crafting as it is me doing the listening, which is again one of the themes of Incantations and of Mermaids in the Moonlight. Listening, listening, listening.
That's lovely. I was. I would very much like for you to read your favorite excerpt from Incantations Over Water. But before that, may I ask just one more question, which I know most readers want to hear about. Do you have a writing process? Do you have a writing routine? Is there anything, any special process you follow, or is it free flowing?
It's quite free flowing, because one thing I learned very long ago is not to fight the rhythms. So there is no such thing as writer's block, for instance. I don't write every day. Sometimes quite often I go months without writing. Sometimes I go years without writing. I do other kinds of writing. I meet my deadlines. I have commitments in my day job work, but not the creative work. Just honor those natural rhythms. And then when a project wakes you up in the middle of the night and says, I'm here, serve me tea, you do it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, tea is very important, especially when there are stories around at midnight. So would you read your favorite part for us, please?
I don't. I was not really prepared.
I'm so
So
sorry
I
for
don't.
springing it on you.
That's all right. I'm just wondering what.
I can pick a part. I have so many that I really liked.
Perhaps I could actually read one of the tsunami parts. I just opened
Yes,
it and we were just talking about it.
sure.
So page 157. And if you don't mind, would you
Absolutely,
share?
I'll hold it up. Yeah, the book is not complete without its graphics. Yeah. Oh, yours is much better. I think it's a camera problem on my side.
Yeah, it's the camera. So I'll read. So not to worry, you don't need to hold up the book in that case because it's kind of blurry.
Yeah, it is. It is very, very. I can see it far more clearly when you hold it up.
So I'll just read this page. When
Sure.
I had decided, at the time of the roiling, to submerge myself deeper, it was not because of survival intuition. It was because I weighed my wanting against my knowing and knew that it was not worth it to try. To see if she would take me with her in her deluge and let me ride her tides into town and terrain. To see if she would let me return, leaf blade and land rubble in my hair, scratched but sound. It was not worth it, the risk of breaking open on the coast. If she did not take me back, I would be found days later, eaten clean, rib cage like a shipwreck's scaffolding, caudate pelvis, coccyx that elongates rung by rung to the flare of my caudal tail tips. I had waited just near enough to observe the turmoil. I could do very little to salvage those who were washed in, but I can tell you this. I stiffened the end for the most wretched carriaways among them, for those smallest and oldest, for those most fearful and injured. It would not have been possible to usher them back to shore, except as corpses, and that duty I left to the mercy of the mother wave, in my own fear, in my own injury, in my own smallness, in my own age. And then I swam out, far out, swam the light of the sky down, and lay in the ocean's arms and watched the stars. The heart is as inexorable as a tidal wave, as thorny as an anchovy, as moon girdled as a shell, and as punctured with islets. And life, even my life, so long and so equivocal, is just sea spray in the breeze.
Wow.
From Incantations.
That was so beautiful. It was also so heartbreaking. Um, yeah. I can't thank you enough for reading that excerpt for us, Sharanya, and for coming here today and for sharing so much with us. I would like to inform the listeners of Pashyantee that unfortunately, due to Westland's closure, Incantations Over Water and its younger sister, Mermaids in Moonlight, are both unfortunately likely to go out of print. So anybody who wants to read these beautiful books, this is their chance to get them. So very grateful for your time and for sharing so generously with us, Sharanya.
Thank you. It was really beautiful and moving for me. Thank you for having this conversation with me, for giving me this space to share. It means a lot.
I wish you so much good healing wishes for your next works. I hope you're going to come out with another beautiful graphic work, because not only your words but your art is very evocative as well. So with that, I would like to end this session of Lekhan Sutra presented by Pashyantee. I hope all of you have enjoyed this conversation with Sharanya Manivannan as much as I have. I'm sure you will enjoy reading her books, and do explore her latest graphic novel, Incantations Over Water, from which she read that mesmerizing excerpt. Thank you.